The first rule she ever gave me wasn't written down, and that's how I knew it mattered. She said it quietly, almost like a joke, while we were washing dishes on a Sunday evening, the kind of ordinary moment where nothing ever changes. She looked at my hands, paused, and said, "You know, you'd be happier if you stopped pretending." I laughed. I always laughed when things got too close. Husbands are supposed to laugh things off. Strong shoulders. Steady voice. Predictable life. That was my job. Or so I thought. But something about the way she said it stuck to me, like a secret pressed into my palm. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing her voice, not accusing, not cruel, just certain. And certainty is dangerous when you've built your entire life on denial. We had been married 7 years. To the outside world, we were perfect. Photos smiling at family dinners, jokes about whose turn it was to cook, polite arguments about bills. What nobody saw were the small negotiations happening inside me every day. The way my eyes lingered on softness. The way mirrors felt like enemies. The way I felt relief when I was alone, doors locked, expectations gone. I told myself it was stress. Everyone has stress. Men just don't talk about it. That's another rule I followed without question. Then came the box. It appeared one afternoon while I was at work. She texted me a single line, "Don't open it yet." That sentence made my heart race more than any fight we'd ever had. When I came home, the box was sitting on the bed like it belonged there. Not hidden. Not dramatic. Just waiting. She sat beside it, calm, almost gentle, and said, "I need you to trust me. Just for tonight." I wanted to ask questions. I wanted to delay. But something inside me was tired of running. I nodded. That nod changed everything. Inside the box were clothes. Not costumes. Not jokes. Soft fabric. Simple colors. Ordinary things that somehow felt forbidden because they felt honest. My chest tightened. My first instinct was anger, not at her, but at myself for the rush of recognition that hit me before fear could stop it. She didn't smile. She didn't tease. She said, "This isn't a game. This is about who you are when no one's watching." Then came the second rule, spoken clearly this time. For 1 year, you follow my rules. Not to control you. To free you. If at any point you want to stop, we stop. A year sounded impossible. A year felt like standing on the edge of a cliff and being asked to step forward calmly. The first night was awkward, quiet, heavy with things we didn't say. I felt clumsy, exposed, like every movement betrayed a truth I had buried too deep. I expected laughter. I expected judgment. What I got was something worse and better at the same time. I got understanding. She adjusted things gently, like she was helping me breathe correctly for the first time. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't recognize the person staring back. Not because it was shocking, but because it felt familiar in a way that scared me. That was the moment I realized this wasn't about clothes. It was about permission. The rules came slowly after that. Small ones at first. Honesty at home. No jokes to deflect feelings. No hiding behind anger. Each rule peeled something away. Some days I hated her for it. Some days I hated myself more. There were nights I lay awake wondering if I was destroying my life or finally living it. I was still a husband to the world, still playing my role perfectly, but inside the walls of our home, something was shifting. Something fragile and powerful at the same time. By the end of the first month, I noticed something terrifying. I was calmer. I listened more. I felt more present in my own skin. That scared me more than discomfort ever had, because comfort meant this wasn't a phase. Comfort meant truth. And truth demands consequences. One night, as she turned off the lights, she whispered the rule that would change the balance forever. "This isn't temporary anymore. This is who you are becoming." My heart pounded. I wanted to argue. I wanted to say I was still the same man. But the words wouldn't come. Because deep down, I knew the next part of the journey would cost me everything I thought I was. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of fear alone, but because my mind wouldn't stop racing forward. Once you accept that something is real, you can't unknow it. The house felt different in the morning, like the walls had heard everything and were waiting to see what I'd do next. She made coffee like always, casual, grounded, as if we weren't standing at the edge of a life-altering truth. That was her strength. She didn't rush me. She let the silence do the work. Finally, she said, "Today's rule is simple. You don't lie to yourself." I almost laughed again, that old defense trying to surface, but I stopped. I nodded instead. It felt heavier than agreeing to anything I'd ever promised before. The weeks that followed weren't dramatic on the outside. No shouting. No ultimatums. Just small changes that stacked up like quiet dominoes. She started calling me out when I defaulted to old habits. When I spoke in that sharp, guarded tone I'd learned as armor. When I pretended I didn't care. "That's not you," she'd say calmly. And every time, something inside me cracked just a little more. I realized how much of my marriage had been me performing a role I thought she needed, not the person she actually wanted. That realization hurt more than any argument ever could. There were moments I tried to reclaim control. I'd say things like, "This doesn't change who I am," or "I'm still your husband." She never argued. She just looked at me and replied, "Titles don't disappear. They evolve." That scared me. Because evolution doesn't ask permission. It just happens. And slowly, painfully, I noticed that the word husband felt heavier than before, while something else felt lighter, closer to the truth I'd buried. I didn't have a name for it yet, but she did. One evening, while we were folding laundry, she said it gently, like testing the sound of it in the air. "You're not just my husband anymore. You're becoming my girlfriend." My hands froze. My chest tightened. I wanted to reject it immediately. But instead, I felt a strange warmth. Like being seen in a way I'd never allowed before. That's when the rules changed. They weren't about appearance anymore. They were about presence. About listening. About vulnerability. She expected emotional honesty in a way I'd never practiced. No hiding behind jokes. No disappearing into silence. If I felt fear, I had to say it. If I felt relief, I had to admit that too. It was exhausting. I'd spent my entire life being praised for being low maintenance, for not needing much. Now I was learning how much I actually felt, and it overwhelmed me. There were days I wanted to quit, to declare the experiment over and go back to the safety of numbness. But every time I reached that edge, something stopped me. It was the way she looked at me now, not disappointed, not confused, but proud. Like she was watching me step into the light after years in a locked room. That look became addictive. I started noticing changes in myself. My reactions softened. My anger didn't flare as fast. I cried once, unexpectedly, over a memory I'd never allowed myself to grieve. She didn't rush to fix it. She just stayed. That was another unspoken rule. Feelings weren't problems. They were signals. Halfway through the year, the double life became harder to manage. At work, I was still the same reliable man everyone expected. At home, I was learning how to exist without that armor. The contrast was exhausting. Some nights I'd sit alone and wonder who would survive if the two worlds collided. That fear followed me everywhere. Family gatherings. Office meetings. Random conversations where someone would joke about masculinity, about how men should be. I laughed along, but inside, something twisted painfully. I realized I wasn't laughing because it was funny. I was laughing because I was afraid. One night, I finally said it out loud. What if everyone leaves? The question came out raw, unfiltered. She didn't answer right away. She took my hands and said, "Some might. But you'll still have yourself. And you'll have me." That was the moment I understood the real rule beneath all the others. This wasn't about changing me into something else. It was about choosing truth over approval. And that choice was becoming impossible to ignore. By the time the year was nearing its end, I wasn't counting days anymore. I was counting moments of clarity. Moments where I felt whole. But with that wholeness came a final fear, heavier than all the others combined. If this was who I truly was, then the last rule would demand the biggest sacrifice yet. And deep down, I knew she was about to say it out loud. The final months of the year didn't arrive loudly. They crept in, quiet and heavy, like the pause before a storm you know is coming but can't stop watching. I felt different waking up each morning, not relieved anymore, not excited either, just aware. Awareness is exhausting. Once you see yourself clearly, you can't hide behind habits or excuses. She noticed it before I said anything. She always did. One night, while we sat on the floor surrounded by nothing important, she said, "You're bracing yourself." I didn't deny it. There was no point. I admitted what had been growing inside me for weeks. I don't know how to exist in both worlds anymore. That was the truth I'd been avoiding. The rules had reshaped how I moved, how I spoke, how I felt. I wasn't pretending anymore at home, and that honesty had changed me in ways I couldn't reverse. But outside, I was still performing. Still careful. Still shrinking parts of myself to fit expectations that suddenly felt unbearable. I felt like I was betraying myself every time I stepped back into that old role. The irony was painful. I had spent years betraying myself without noticing. Now that I had tasted honesty, even a small lie felt unbearable. She didn't give me a new rule right away. That scared me more than when she did. Silence meant choice. Choice meant responsibility. A few days later, she finally spoke, her voice steady but serious. "The next rule isn't mine to enforce," she said. "It's yours to decide." My heart raced. I wanted instructions. I wanted structure. I wanted her to tell me exactly what to do so I wouldn't have to own the consequences. But she didn't. She just waited. I started paying attention to how people responded to me without me trying so hard. I noticed how forced my laughter sounded at work, how drained I felt after conversations that required me to armor up. I noticed how alive I felt when I was honest, even in small ways. A pause instead of a joke. A boundary instead of compliance. These weren't dramatic acts. They were subtle rebellions. But each one felt like oxygen. And with every breath, the fear grew louder too. Fear of judgment. Fear of rejection. Fear of losing the life I had built brick by brick. The hardest moment came unexpectedly. A simple question from a friend, meant casually, tossed into a conversation without thought. "You ever think about who you'd be if you weren't trying so hard?" I smiled automatically, but something inside me broke. That night, I couldn't stop shaking. I realized the world was already asking the question I'd been avoiding. And I was running out of time to answer it honestly. When I told her I didn't know if I could keep hiding, she didn't celebrate. She didn't push. She just said, "Whatever you choose, choose it fully." That sentence haunted me. Fully meant no half-truths. No secret selves. No escape routes. Fully meant stepping into a version of myself that didn't apologize for existing. And that terrified me more than any rule ever had. As the year's end approached, I felt the weight of a decision pressing down on me every day. The rules had changed my life quietly, but the next step would be loud, even if I spoke softly. One evening, as we sat together in the dim light, she finally said the words I'd been dreading and longing for at the same time. "I don't see you as my husband trying to change anymore. I see you as my girlfriend choosing to exist." The word hung in the air, fragile and powerful. I didn't correct her. I didn't argue. I felt something settle inside me, like a puzzle piece finally clicking into place. But acceptance didn't erase fear. If anything, it sharpened it. Because now the question wasn't who I was. The question was what I was willing to risk to live as myself. And I knew the final part of this journey wouldn't be about rules at all. It would be about courage. And courage, I was learning, is the most expensive thing a person can ever choose. The last day of the year arrived without ceremony. No countdown. No dramatic music. Just morning light spilling into the room like it always had. And yet everything felt different, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't wondering who I needed to be that day. I already knew. That realization didn't bring instant peace. It brought gravity. Because knowing who you are means you can no longer blame confusion for your choices. You either step forward or you don't. And whatever happens next belongs to you. She didn't give me a final rule. She didn't need to. The rules had done their work. They had stripped away the noise, the habits, the hiding. What was left was a person standing honestly in their own life for the first time. I looked at her and said something I'd never said out loud before. I'm scared, but I don't want to go back. My voice shook, but it didn't break. She smiled softly, not triumphant, not relieved, just present. Then don't, she said. This is your life now. That day, nothing dramatic happened. No big announcement. No confrontation. Just a quiet decision repeated in small ways. I stopped correcting myself when I spoke gently. I stopped apologizing for taking up emotional space. I stopped shrinking. And in doing so, I realized something unexpected. I hadn't lost my marriage. It had transformed with me. The label husband had once felt like a cage because I was using it to hide. Now it felt like history, not erased, but honored. And the word girlfriend didn't feel like replacement. It felt like truth finally being spoken without fear. Not everyone understood. Some never would. And yes, there were losses. Conversations that ended differently. Relationships that grew distant. But there were also moments of surprising grace. People who saw the calm in my eyes before they noticed anything else. People who responded not to labels, but to authenticity. I learned that when you stop lying to yourself, the world doesn't end. It reshapes. Slowly. Unevenly. But honestly. The biggest change wasn't how I looked or how I was seen. It was how I lived inside my own skin. I no longer felt like I was waiting for permission to exist. I no longer rehearsed my reactions. I felt present in moments that used to pass me by. And when fear showed up, as it still does, I didn't see it as a warning anymore. I saw it as proof that I was standing somewhere real. Looking back, I understand now that the rules were never about control. They were about safety. A structure strong enough to hold a truth I'd been too afraid to face alone. From husband to girlfriend wasn't a fall from something solid. It was a step toward something honest. My life didn't become easier. It became mine. And if there's one thing I want anyone listening to know, it's this. Transformation doesn't happen in a single brave moment. It happens in 1,000 quiet choices to stop pretending. To stop hiding. To live, even when your voice shakes. This wasn't her life taking over mine. This was me finally showing up for myself. And once you do that, there's no rule powerful enough to take it away.